the brand new RTX 3080 Ti in the flesh. DLSS 4K max settings, and we're getting around about 130 frames a second. Ladies and gentlemen, the RTX 3080 Ti is here. Can you believe it? Nvidia are releasing a brand new graphics card at a time when you can't really buy new graphics cards. But regardless, this is still an incredibly exciting launch. This is the brand new flagship gaming graphics card, if you like. Yes, it's not quite as, well, I say as powerful. It's not got quite as much VRAM as the RTX 3090, but I'd imagine in terms of performance, this is pretty much going to be neck and neck, except this thing is actually going to be a whole lot cheaper. In this video then, we're going to be creating the ultimate RTX 3080 Ti gaming PC. As always, we're going to walk you through the full build process so you can see exactly how well these components go together, and quite literally whether it is difficult or easy to build. And then of course we'll show you those all-important gameplay benchmark numbers. The very first time I've seen the RTX 3080 Ti, we'll be able to answer once and for all whether it's hot or not. Or I suppose technically both if it doesn't perform very well but it overheats. Stay tuned to learn everything that you need to know after a short word from this video's sponsor. Corsair has gone small with a new K65 RGB Mini. This 60% mechanical keyboard will not only look incredible on your desk, but it'll save you space and let you game at your very best. Powered by Corsair Axon hyper-processing technology, the K65 RGB Mini can pull at a mind-boggling 8000 Hz for super fast reaction times. Play your best game today with the K65 RGB Mini. Check it out with that link down below. To keep things rather fresh and a little bit hot and spicy, we do actually have quite a different case this time around. This is called the Dark Cube, and it is from Antec, and I'll start by saying that this definitely isn't a very budget-orientated chassis, but for a high-end build, you want something that you can properly be proud of and show off. The reason that I'm showing you this at the start, though, is because this is actually micro ATX. It is quite a long chassis, but as you can see, it's not going to take up an absolutely huge amount of space on your desk, so it's definitely something that is going to stand out, and it is also an inverted layout, so it is going to look a little bit different to your average gaming PC, but especially with a Founders Edition RTX 3080 Ti, I think it's going to look wicked. Oh, I missed a trick there. I should have painted myself green, fitted some strings to the ceiling, and then flown off. If you don't like musicals, you won't understand that quote, but I do. The motherboard that we're using is the B550M Mortar from MSI, and this is going to be pretty much the perfect motherboard really for any gaming PC build, especially micro ATX. Because this is B550, you can actually put a 16-core Ryzen CPU in here if you want to at a later date. We have PCI Generation 4 support for both an SSD and a graphics card, and in terms of I/O, there's not really that much to complain about. The only thing that I'll note is that there isn't actually any Wi-Fi on this motherboard, so if you do need to use that, then obviously either go for something else, or you can do what I'm doing, which is definitely not ideal, which is to add an add-in card at a later date. As with all B550 motherboards, you really do have such a great choice of CPU. The one that we've grabbed here is the Ryzen 5800X, and this is probably the one that I would go for on balance if I was building a gaming PC, as it's future-proof enough as you have 8 cores in here, but fundamentally the single-core gaming performance of this thing is just through the roof. So it doesn't matter if you want to do 4K gaming on your TV downstairs, or maybe you want to try 360 Hz gaming at 1080p, this thing is going to be able to handle both. You probably already knew this, but with the Ryzen 5800X and above, you don't actually get a stock cooling solution anymore, so you are going to need to invest in something, well, a little bit better than nothing, but I think most of us really at this price point would probably do that anyway, but it definitely would be nice to have the choice. We're going for one of the PC Centric classic components when it comes to RAM. This is Crucial Ballistics RGB, and I love this stuff because it's always pretty well priced, but it's also extremely low profile. This kit is running at 3600 MHz, which is going to give you that little bit extra performance, especially with Ryzen CPUs, but it is worth noting that I'm using a 16GB kit here, and if you think you're going to need more RAM, then I would strongly advise that you get 32 from the off, not because it's going to give you more gaming performance really, but just because it then means you can upgrade to a total of 64 rather than being limited to 32 like we are here today. Honestly, computer components these days really are incredible. I mean, just look how well themed this is. Do you see what I mean about the RAM as well? It's so low profile. Just like my perk in Call of Duty. I think we're going back a few years for that though, aren't we? It was all about Commando Pro. I really do have a habit of going off topic, don't I? But don't worry, we are back on it. We're going to talk about our SSD. This is the WD Black. This is the SN850, one of the fastest drives you can get right now. This takes full advantage of PCIe 4, and I've said it before and I'll say it again. In terms of gaming performance, this isn't really going to make too much difference today. You can find my full video actually exploring the different speeds of drives and game load times in the top right corner of your screen. However, this is likely to change in the coming years as we have new APIs and just faster game engines that will actually start streaming directly off of the SSD, and this is going to mean you're going to get game settings that will probably require a fast SSD, and in the future hopefully it will mean that game times will quite literally be instant. And we're not talking about any of that instant noodle 30-second business, we're talking about instant coffee. Don't buy instant coffee, it's horrible. Which is exactly why this video is sponsored by... no, it's not really. Got 'em! As with all B550 motherboards, make sure that you do actually use the top slot if you are using a Generation 4 SSD, as all of the lower ones are limited by the chipset to Gen 3. Now, for the more unusual bit, I'm actually building inside the Dark Cube. I probably should start by saying that you do actually get a choice of two fronts on this. You can either use the default diamond, quite unique looking mesh grille, which is of course going to be brilliant for airflow. But if you want to go for something a little bit more tasteful, shall we say, or something a bit more traditional, then you do also get a full tempered glass panel in the box as well. So you can swap them out, see what works best for you, and ultimately choose the one that you like the most. But the real magic happens when you actually unscrew the back panel, because the whole thing slides out. Look at that. That's a little bit different. Everything gets a lot lighter, and you basically build on this and then you just put it back in when you're done. Antec with the forward thinking. Does this look impressive? Because it's very light. But this motherboard will just quite neatly sit in this little slot upside down before screwing it in the usual fashion. This is what the whole thing will look like once you've got the motherboard in place. So if you've seen an inverted layout before, pretty standard stuff, but obviously the main thing really to bear in mind, other than it looking upside down, is the fact that the window is going to be on the opposite side. So if you have your computer on your desk and you need it to be in a certain place, then this actually could save your bacon, or it could, I don't know, cost you your lamb's leg. That sounds so mean. Along with the case, Antec did also provide some fans. These are their Prism 120 ARGBs, and I've not used these before, so I'm quite excited to see whether they come alive. I wasn't expecting that. You also get some LED strips in the box as well. So this kit has 3 fans, the controller, and then 2 sets of LEDs. The fans themselves do look pretty good. You've got light loops on both sides, and they do use the standard addressable RGB system, so you can either connect it directly to the motherboard, or in the box you get a fan controller and an RGB controller. Just like the motherboard and pretty much every other component in the system, you need to fit this directly to the frame before sliding it in, rather than doing this to the whole finished unit. In terms of airflow, we're not doing anything out of the ordinary. We have all of the air coming in through the front and blowing out of the back. We will be fitting a radiator to this system though, which means handing over to our tame Master Liquid ML240L RGB. Very weird segue. To be clear, this is definitely not the best liquid cooler that you can buy, but this is actually around about half the price of Corsair's very best ones, which I think is pretty crazy, because the performance of this is still excellent. There were a few different ways that we could do this, but I've ultimately opted to put the Antec fans on the outside, again blowing through into the case, but then on the inside, I have actually managed to fit the standard fans that do come with the cooler. The only issue that you're going to have is with clearance with the graphics card. I think the Founders Edition should be fine, but if you're using pretty much any big beefy modern 3080, 3080 Ti, then chances are it will actually start to clash here, so do be very careful. I mean, to me, it does actually scream water-cooled loop, because you could definitely have a radiator here and then at the front, and effectively that's a 360, and that should be enough for pretty much all but the most demanding water-cooled loops. If you want to see that, let me know down in the comment section below. It turns out that you don't even need to use that fan controller box, because there is actually one baked in right at the top of this case, so you can control RGB and up to 3 fans from this, but don't forget you can daisy chain the RGB, so essentially you've got 3 channels, so you can use one for the fans, one for the strips, and then one for something else. There's definitely quite a lot of cable management. I don't think I've spoken to the camera in about 20 minutes, half an hour trying to get everything sorted out, which is probably a little bit unusual, but the main reason is just because there's almost not the best sort of cable management channels or anything. You have this big bunch of cables to the front panel at the top here, and they don't go round the back and then back in because you don't really have the spaces. Anyway, we got there in the end. Our cables are managed well enough for now, which means we can add some more with a power supply. And this is a 750 watt unit, so if you want to add a lot more stuff in this, my voice went very weird there, didn't it? If you want to add a lot more stuff there. This is the NZXT C750, and 750 watts should be more than enough for this build, but if you are going to grab like a 5950X and then say upgrade it later to a 3090, then obviously an 850 or 1000 watt PSU would be more preferable. As you'd expect for a build of this price or caliber, this is a fully modular PSU, which if you're not familiar essentially means that you don't have to plug all of the cables in, you only need to use the ones that you're actually going to put inside your PC and actively use. And I think that quite literally in this case, it is going to make a whole bunch of sense. This case uses the quite nifty sliding system for the power supply as well, so you just push that in through the back and then screw it in place. We'll plug in all of the cables, including the CPU, which is now down the bottom, which definitely freaks me out a little bit when I couldn't find it. Some real talk for Antec though, this hole down here is actually way too small, and if you don't have an 8-pin that splits in half, I think this might actually be quite difficult to get through here, which would be an absolute calamity. But with that out of the way, it leads us on to our star of the show, the brand new RTX 3080 Ti in the flesh. And if it looks more or less identical to the 3080, then it's because pretty much the cooling solution is. It's the same sort of pull-through design. We do have some more memory. This is 12 gig rather than 10. But then in terms of performance, well, we should find out in just a second. It is definitely tight, but I have faith. This is why they say put the radiator in before your graphics card. It really is quite frustrating for the PCI card mounting system though, as they've tried to be clever and they've given you this little clamp system, but then this isn't very sturdy at all, so I've decided not to use it, but then you can't really screw any other screws where you normally would, so you sort of have to use this. Why? Once you've installed this little plate, everything looks good, but then it just pulls off. Dumb. This is about as secure as I was talking to girls in my class when I was 16. The final piece of the puzzle, and I know it's your favourite thing, is my special 12-pin adapter for the GPU, bright and colourful. Say what you will about my style, but it is definitely a lot better than the one that you get in the box. I don't know if I can actually say that seriously this time. That really does not go, does it? But we said that last time and it worked out just fine. I mean, the big question really is, will this actually go back in first time without having to take any of the cables out? Because if the answer is no, I'm gonna be so frustrated. It's hot, I'm tired, I wanna go to bed. I mean, it's 1936, I want some dinner. Ugh. It definitely is a lot harder when it's full, but that does start to slide in. But we do have some serious cable management issues at the back. I honestly think you've got to do the cable management once it's inside the chamber, because it looks like I've got to take most of it out now. You could have told me in the instruction manual, couldn't you? There are a few different channels around the back that you can't use, the main one being at the top here. You can't have anything go over it, which isn't really very self-explanatory, which is why I had to redo it. I'll spin it round so you can see exactly what we're talking about. And essentially all of those really thin cables, things like HD audio, USB, and then the power switch cables, can all actually go up here through this like little channel, I guess, within the motherboard. And that really isn't that obvious, especially when you think that all of the fan cables were actually a little bit too thick and didn't want to go through there. So all in all, I must say I am a little bit disappointed, because I think they've tried to make it a bit easier to build in, and in doing so, they've actually made it a little bit harder. But let's grab a monitor and actually see if this works. Fingers crossed. We have some lights, but the question is, will we get a display? It's not looking great at the moment, is it? This is really sad. I've built so many computers over the last year, and I don't think I've had a serious problem with any of them. So statistics would tell you that this was going to happen at some point, but it's never nice when it rears its ugly head. If you're wondering why I have to start this computer with a screwdriver, by the way, it's because when you don't have it in the chassis, you don't have a power button. Another reason that this case is a bit annoying. Come on, HDMI. Let's try an HDMI cable. Can you believe it? DisplayPort said no. HDMI said yes. Ladies and gentlemen, we are all set up and finally ready to go. And I'm going to start by saying that this case looks very good. I'm very happy with the end result. But honestly, I don't think I've had a case that was actually this difficult to build in a long time. But having said that, as I've already mentioned, if you do like the overall appearance of this and the form factor and you want something that is quite unique, then I don't think that would stop me from recommending this. You just do have to be aware that this isn't going to be the easiest thing to keep tinkering with over time. But let's be honest, that's probably not why you're here. You want to see some benchmark numbers for the brand new 3080 Ti. So here we are in Just Cause 4, which is a pretty demanding game. This is running at absolute max settings, and as you can see, there is absolutely no problem whatsoever with that frame rate. This is very much a controller game, and to be getting anywhere between 80 and 100 frames a second at 4K is definitely not a small feat, shall we say. If, however, you're more of a 1440p gamer, then you can see that the frame rate is going to skyrocket once you turn the resolution down. But because we are doing this in combination with a really good CPU, with that 5800X, you can see we're not really getting any form of CPU bottlenecking. In fact, this game doesn't seem to be that CPU intensive at all. Proceeding on to our most demanding title with some Cyberpunk running at Ray Tracing Ultra with DLSS at 4K set to automatic, and you will see that actually it is a really surprisingly high frame rate with around about pretty much bang on the money 60 FPS. Obviously this is going to vary from place to place, but this is a game that is so difficult to drive. Most of the PCs that I'm building have to be run with ray tracing set to 1080p or just turned off, otherwise you're not able to get that magical 60 FPS. So to be able to do it is remarkable. I wish I could have actually played the game with all of the settings turned up to max and not had to compromise at all. And with an RTX 3080 Ti, it does look like that is actually going to happen. However, it's definitely not all good news, because this case does not seem to be very optimized for a graphics card like this Reference Founders Edition, where you actually have air pulled in from the top and then brought down. Because you've got this tempered glass piece on the top, and in my eyes, this would have been so much better if it was mesh. I don't really understand why it's glass. Maybe it's so you can see your GPU, but who wants to see their GPU when you could pretty much get rid of the noise and give yourself better boost clocks by having mesh? This would be a very easy mod to actually make yourself. You could quite easily just get a different dust filter and then sort of cut it out and lay it on the top. But it is a bit of a shame you don't get that option inside the box. Let's turn the resolution down to 1440p in Cyberpunk and keep all other settings the same. And our frame rate has immediately increased to around about, what's that, 85 to 90 FPS. So we're definitely getting something that's a lot more fluid, and it's definitely going to help you in more of those street brawling situations. But interestingly, looking at the temperatures, you can see it has definitely come down now to around about 82, 83 degrees, which probably doesn't sound that impressive, but the thing that I've noticed sitting right next to the computer is that it's got a lot quieter as well, so clearly those fans don't have to work as hard. Let us move on to our multiplayer titles though, and the fan favourite Apex Legends does of course make an appearance, and as you can see, these figures are pretty ridiculous. Absolute max settings at 4K, anywhere between 115 and around about 140 frames a second. So absolutely no compromise whatsoever, and this is actually furthered by the fact that you get Nvidia's reflex technology in this game, so you're not having to put up with the usual sort of latency issues that you might get by playing at 4K, so this very much is the perfect cake and eat it situation. Lower it down to 1440p and our numbers have increased to around about 200 frames a second. Of course it is going to vary depending on where you are in the map, and I do think that we might be slightly thermally restricted. I would wager that there is actually a little bit more to give in this GPU. Some people love Apex, others demand Warzone. And here we are running DLSS 4K max settings, and we're getting around about 130 frames a second, which is absolutely mad, and it really does show you the power of DLSS, because this does look pretty much identical really to 4K. If you're pixel peeping, I'm sure you'd be able to notice a slight difference, but for all intents and purposes, when you're running around the map, this is 4K quality, and it really does look glorious. And then just for good measure, we have 1440p gameplay with DLSS once again set to quality. I do think there is a slight issue's not the right word, but changing the settings when you're using DLSS at the moment isn't optimized. But it is a boost nonetheless of around about, what, 20 to 30 FPS? So clearly, if you want to play Call of Duty Warzone, this is an epic PC to do it on. For those Warzone tests, I did take the side panel off as well as the top, so I guess you can get a better idea of best case scenario temperatures, as this wasn't best case scenario. But I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts on this computer. In terms of component choices, it's brilliant. The 3080 Ti isn't as expensive as the 3090, yet it has pretty much identical gaming performance. And then the Ryzen 5800X gives you a great blend between extra performance for gaming that you can use today, and then the 8 cores for the longevity into the future. It's just the case that I'm not really a huge fan of, because it is very expensive, it doesn't really come with the fans that you need to actually get started, and in terms of the build process, it's not really the best out there. It's not a disaster, it's just not really good enough for the money. Smash the like button on this video, it really does help out, and of course get yourself subscribed for more just like this. If you do want to check out current pricing on anything in this video, then as always you can find that linked down below with my Amazon affiliate links. And of course, while you're down there, do bask in the RGB glory of the K65 RGB Mini. If you're after a small yet fully featured mechanical gaming keyboard, then look no further. Packing Cherry MX mechanical key switches, durable PBT double shot keycaps, and per key RGB lighting, the K65 RGB Mini is just the ticket for gamers looking to downsize. Get yours today with that link down below. Thank you so much for watching this video, I really appreciate it. I'll see you in the next one.